Watch where you're going, you absolute jerk. Marlo Cassidy's favorite blouse, the cream-colored one she'd been saving for job interviews, was now decorated with an entire venti caramel macchiato. The coffee dripped down her chest, hot enough to make her gasp, cold enough to ruin her entire morning. The man who'd crashed into her outside the Starbucks on Madison Avenue didn't even look up. He was too busy barking orders into his phone, his other hand already gesturing impatiently for his driver to approach with the black Mercedes idling at the curb. "Excuse me." Marlo's voice rose another octave. "You just dumped an entire coffee on me." He finally glanced at her, barely. Designer sunglasses hid his eyes, but she caught the dismissive once-over, the way his jaw tightened in annoyance at being interrupted. Dark hair perfectly styled, suit that probably cost more than her rent, and an expression that screamed, "I don't have time for this." "Bill, handle it," he said into the phone, then gestured vaguely in Marlo's direction while his driver opened the car door. "Send her a check or whatever." "A check?" Marlo sputtered. "How about an apology, you pompous—" But he was already sliding into the Mercedes, the door closing with an expensive thunk, and the car was pulling away into Manhattan traffic before she could finish calling him every name she'd learned growing up in Queens. "Asshole," she shouted at the disappearing vehicle, earning stares from other pedestrians. "Entitled rich prick." An elderly woman walking her Pomeranian gave Marlo a sympathetic pat on the arm. "They're all like that in this neighborhood, dear. Best to just let it go." But Marlo couldn't let it go. She stood there, coffee-soaked and furious, watching the Mercedes disappear around the corner, making a mental note of the license plate. Ash 1. Probably stood for asshole number 1. She checked her phone. 9:47 a.m. She had exactly 13 minutes to get back to her apartment in Queens, change clothes, and somehow make it to her interview at the Ashford Mansion in Connecticut by 2 p.m. "Perfect," she muttered, looking down at her ruined blouse. "Just perfect." If someone had told her she'd see that arrogant jerk again in less than 4 hours, she would have laughed. Destiny, apparently, had a twisted sense of humor. The interview with Vivian Ashford had been exactly as terrifying as Marlo expected. The woman had ice in her veins and had made it abundantly clear that Marlo was barely acceptable for the position. But the salary, 3 times what she made now with room and board included, was impossible to refuse. Nana Birdie needed her medication. The rent was overdue. Pride was a luxury Marlo couldn't afford. "You'll start tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. sharp," Vivian had said, dismissing her with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "Cornelius will show you to your quarters tonight. You'll stay during the week, return home on weekends. No visitors, no drama. No involvement with family affairs whatsoever." "Yes, ma'am." "And Miss Cassidy?" Vivian's ice-blue eyes had fixed on her. "My son returns from London this evening. He's engaged to be married in 6 months. I expect absolute professionalism." Marlo had nodded, having no idea why that particular warning seemed so pointed. Now, at 5:45 a.m. on Monday morning, she stood in her new uniform, a simple gray dress with a white collar that made her look like she'd time-traveled from a 1950s movie, clutching her supply caddy, and following Cornelius through the labyrinth of the mansion. "The family quarters are off-limits unless you're specifically called to clean them," the butler explained in his crisp British accent. "You'll start with the main receiving rooms, the library, the conservatory, and the guest suites. The master bedroom and Mr. Dashiell's suite are handled by senior staff." "Understood." Mr. Dashiell typically breakfasts at 7, works from the home office until 10, then goes into the city. You'll want to avoid those areas during those hours. Marlo nodded, making mental notes. Avoid the sun. Stay invisible. Do her job. Collect her paycheck. Simple. The library was her first assignment. A massive 2-story room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, rolling ladders, and windows that overlooked the manicured gardens. It was beautiful in a way that made Marlo's chest ache. She'd always loved books, had dreamed of finishing college, maybe becoming a teacher. But life had other plans. She was up on one of the ladders, dusting the top shelves and humming Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, when she heard the door open behind her. "Cornelius, have you seen my—" The voice stopped abruptly. Marlowe turned on the ladder, dustcloth in hand, and looked down, and froze. Standing in the doorway, wearing expensive pajama pants and a t-shirt that should have been casual but somehow looked like a fashion statement, was the coffee-spilling, apology-refusing, absolute jerk from yesterday. He was staring at her with the same shocked expression she must have been wearing. "You," they said simultaneously. Marlowe's shock morphed into fury in approximately 0.3 seconds. "Are you kidding me right now?" Dashiell Ashford, because of course that's who he was, the universe hated her, seemed to recover from his surprise. His jaw tightened, and something flickered across his face. Annoyance, embarrassment. It was hard to tell because he'd apparently perfected the blank aristocratic expression that his mother wore so well. "You work here," he stated flatly. "Brilliant observation, Sherlock." Marlowe climbed down the ladder with more force than necessary, her hands clenched around the dust cloth. "And you live here, which means you're Dashiell Ashford." He didn't extend his hand for a shake. "Smart man." "The son." Marlowe laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course, because my life wasn't complicated enough." "Look," he started. "No. You look." She pointed the dust cloth at him like a weapon. "Yesterday you crashed into me, destroyed my favorite blouse, didn't apologize, and drove off like I was something on the bottom of your expensive shoe. And now I have to work for you? Clean your house? Pretend you're not an entitled, arrogant—" "I remember," he interrupted quietly. That stopped her mid-rant. "What?" "I remember." He ran a hand through his dark hair, and for the first time Marlowe noticed he actually looked tired, and younger than she'd initially thought. Maybe early 30s. There were shadows under his eyes that expensive genetics couldn't hide. "Yesterday, the coffee. You're right, I was a complete ass. I was on the phone with my lawyer, dealing with a crisis, and I wasn't paying attention, and He stopped, seeming to realize he was explaining himself to the help. His staff. Someone he could probably get fired with a single word to his mother. The reality of the power dynamic settled over Marlowe like a wet blanket. She needed this job. Nana Birdie needed this job. Her pride, her very justified anger, was a luxury she absolutely could not afford. "Forget it," she said, her voice suddenly flat. "It doesn't matter." "It does." "No, sir, it doesn't." She emphasized the "sir" just enough to make it sting. "You're Mr. Ashford, I'm the cleaning girl. You were right yesterday. Problems like that get handled with a check. I'm sure Cornelius can arrange for compensation for my blouse. Now if you'll excuse me, I have shelves to dust." She turned back to the ladder, dismissing him the way he'd dismissed her yesterday. Dashiell stood there for a long moment. She could feel his eyes on her back, could sense him trying to figure out what to say. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "For what it's worth," he finally said, his voice softer than before. "I am sorry. About yesterday. You deserved better." Marlowe didn't turn around. "Apology noted, sir." Another pause. "And for the record, I don't think I'm going to forget this." "Forget what, sir?" "Being called an entitled rich prick at the top of someone's lungs on Madison Avenue." There was something in his voice. Was that amusement? It was refreshing. No one talks to me like that. Maybe they should. She heard what might have been a laugh, quickly stifled. "Maybe they should," he agreed quietly. When she finally risked a glance over her shoulder, he was gone. Marlowe released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped the ladder. This job was supposed to be simple. Show up, clean, collect paycheck, help Nana Birdie, save money, maybe eventually finish school. It was not supposed to include the most infuriating man she'd ever met. It was definitely not supposed to include the fact that when Dashiell Ashford had looked at her just now, really looked at her, not through her, something in her chest had done a dangerous flip. No, she told herself firmly. Absolutely not. Not happening. But her hands were still shaking when she went back to dusting. In his office down the hall, Dashiell stood at the window, staring out at nothing. The coffee girl. The angry, fierce, absolutely fearless woman who'd shouted at him in the middle of Manhattan was now in his house, working as his mother's staff. And when she'd turned around on that ladder, with dust in her hair and fire in her eyes, looking at him like he was something unpleasant she'd scraped off her shoe, he'd felt more alive than he had in months. Penelope never looked at him like that. Penelope looked at him like a business merger, like a strategic alliance, like the arrangement their families had made when they were children, finally coming to fruition. His phone buzzed. Speak of the devil. Penelope. The wedding planner needs your opinion on the cake samples. Thursday at 2 p.m. Don't be late. Not, I miss you. Not, how was your flight? Not, I can't wait to see you. Just, cake samples. Dashiell looked at the message, then back toward the library. From down the hall he could hear her humming again. Off-key. Completely unself-conscious. He was absolutely, completely, irreversibly screwed. And the worst part? For the first time in years he felt like smiling. Cornelius, he called out. The butler appeared as if by magic. Sir? The new girl. Miss Cassidy, sir. Marlo Cassidy. Right. Make sure she receives a generous clothing allowance. Compensation for yesterday. Cornelius's expression didn't change. The man was professionally impassive. But Dashiell could swear he saw something knowing in those eyes. Of course, sir. Will there be anything else? No? Yes. Actually, Dashiell stopped himself. What was he going to say? Make sure she's happy? Comfortable? Singing in every room I'm in? Never mind. Very good, sir. When Cornelius left, Dashiell pulled out his phone and stared at Penelope's message. 6 months. The wedding was in 6 months. He had 6 months to stop thinking about brown curls and a terrible singing voice and the way someone had finally, treated him like a regular person instead of a walking bank account. 6 months to forget about the girl in the library. It should have been plenty of time. It wouldn't be nearly enough. From her office in the West Wing, Vivian Ashford set down her teacup with a delicate clink and turned to her assistant. Tell me everything you know about this Marlo Cassidy. The assistant pulled up the file. 26 years old, from Queens, never finished college, financial reasons, clean record, lives with her grandmother, works 3 jobs currently, excellent references from all previous employers. Family. Father unknown. Mother died when she was 12. Raised by the maternal grandmother, Bertie Cassidy, 78, retired secretary. Vivian's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose a fraction. No family money. No connections. No prospects. No, ma'am. And yet she has the audacity to look at my son like... Vivian stopped herself, took a breath. Control. Always control. That will be all. When the assistant left, Vivian walked to the window overlooking the gardens. She'd worked too hard for too many years to let some nobody from Queens ruin the alliance with the Vanderburg family. The wedding would happen. The merger would go through. The Ashford empire would double in value. And if that meant removing any obstacles, well, Vivian Ashford hadn't gotten where she was by being sentimental. The girl would be gone within the month, one way or another. Marlo had perfected the art of invisibility by day 3. She learned Dashiell's schedule with military precision. Breakfast at 7 in the solarium, office work until 10, departure for the city by 10:15. She'd be in the East Wing when he was in the West, upstairs when he was down. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, leaving behind only the scent of lemon polish and the faint echo of her humming. It was working perfectly. Until Wednesday afternoon, when it absolutely wasn't. Miss Cassidy. Cornelius appeared in the doorway of the conservatory where Marlo was watering the orchids, apparently a task that required specific training she'd received that morning. Mrs. Ashford requests your presence in the main drawing room, immediately. Marlo's stomach dropped. In 3 days, Vivian had spoken to her exactly twice. Once to criticize how she'd folded the guest towels, and once to remind her that fraternizing with family members is grounds for immediate termination. That second warning had come with a look so sharp it could have drawn blood. The drawing room was full of people when Marlowe arrived. All women, all dripping with diamonds and judgment. A wedding planning committee, she realized with growing dread. Ah, there you are. Vivian's smile was poisonous honey. Ladies, this is our new domestic assistant, Miss Cassidy. We're having a small issue with the refreshment service. Claire called in sick. You'll be serving tea. It wasn't a request. Marlowe had never served formal tea in her life. The silver service trembled in her hands as she approached the first guest, a woman whose face had been pulled so tight she looked perpetually surprised. Sugar? Marlowe asked quietly. 2 lumps. And do try not to spill, girl. Marlowe's jaw clenched, but she managed the sugar without incident. She was moving to the next guest when the drawing room door opened. Mother, have you seen my... Dashiell stopped dead, his eyes landing on Marlowe in her uniform, holding a teapot like it might explode. What's going on? Darling. A blonde vision in Chanel glided into the room behind him and latched onto his arm like a beautiful barnacle. There you are. We're finalizing the seating chart. Your mother insisted we... Oh. Ice blue eyes fixed on Marlowe with the warmth of a glacier. Is this the new help? Penelope Vanderberg was everything Marlowe wasn't. Tall, elegant, with the kind of effortless beauty that came from generations of good genetics and better skin care. She looked at Marlowe the way someone might look at a smudge on their Louboutins. Miss Cassidy, Dashiell said, his voice carefully neutral. But his eyes were apologetic. Sir. Marlowe gave a small nod, hating how the word felt in her mouth. Miss. How quaint. Penelope laughed, the sound like wind chimes made of icicles. She's so authentic. Where did you find her, Vivian? Central casting? The women tittered. Marlowe's fingers tightened on the teapot handle. Penelope, that's... Dashiell started. Oh, don't be so serious, darling. I'm sure she knows we're joking. Penelope waved her hand dismissively. Now about the seating chart. I absolutely cannot have your dreadful Aunt Millicent near my parents. Last year at the Hampton benefit, she told Mother that her Botox looked aggressive. Can you imagine? Marlowe tuned out the conversation and continued serving tea, her face carefully blank. This was fine. She'd dealt with worse. That summer, working at the country club in the Hamptons, she'd served plenty of people who treated her like furniture. She was setting down a cup for another guest when her elbow caught the edge of a side table. Time slowed as she watched the teacup tilt, the hot liquid arcing through the air in a perfect trajectory toward Penelope's white Chanel skirt. No! 3 voices shouted simultaneously. But Dashiell was faster. He lunged forward, catching the cup mid-air with reflexes that would have made a professional athlete jealous. Tea sloshed over his hand. Marlowe heard him hiss in pain, but not a drop touched his fiancée. Oh my God, Dashiell. Penelope clutched her chest dramatically. You could have been seriously burned. I'm fine. He set the cup down, cradling his reddened hand. You're not fine, it's already blistering. Vivian was on her feet, her face a mask of controlled fury. Miss Cassidy, this is absolutely unacceptable. It was an accident, Mother. An accident that could have ruined a $15,000 outfit. But it didn't. Dashiell's voice was quiet but firm. His eyes met Marlowe's and something passed between them. An understanding, a connection that made her breath catch. No harm done. No harm. Dashiell, your hand. Needs ice. Miss Cassidy, would you get the first aid kit from the kitchen, please? It was a dismissal disguised as a request, getting her out of the firing line. Marlowe nodded mutely and fled, her face burning with humiliation and something else she couldn't name. In the kitchen, she pressed her palms against the cool marble counter and tried to steady her breathing. Mrs. Chen, the head cook, took one look at her face and produced both the first aid kit and a glass of water. That bad, huh? Worse. Mrs. Ashford will calm down, probably, eventually. Mrs. Chen patted her shoulder. And don't worry about Mr. Dashiell. That boy survived worse than a little hot tea. Marlowe picked up the first aid kit, dreading the return journey. But when she reached the hallway outside the drawing room, Dashiell was already there, leaning against the wall, still cradling his hand. "You didn't have to wait," she said quietly. "I could have given it to Cornelius." "I know." He straightened. "But I wanted to. Look, about what Penelope said. It's fine. It's not fine, she was cruel. She's your fiancé." Marlo opened the first aid kit, pulling out burn cream and bandages. Somewhere in the distance she could hear Penelope's laugh echoing from the drawing room. "You should get back to her. Let me do it myself. Your hand is your right one. You need your left to apply the cream." She took his injured hand in hers, trying to ignore the way his breath hitched at the contact. "Hold still." His hand was larger than hers, long fingers and calluses that surprised her. She'd expected softness, but there was evidence of work here. Guitar player, maybe? The burn was already blistering across his palm. "This is going to sting," she warned. "I've had worse." She applied the cream as gently as possible, hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. This close, she could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive that made her want to lean in. Could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow. "How'd you get that?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "What?" "The scar." He smiled slightly. "Fell out of a tree when I was 8. I was trying to prove to my father that I was brave enough to climb to the top. Made it 3/4 of the way before the branch broke." "Did it work? Did he think you were brave?" The smile faded. "He thought I was stupid. Said Ashfords don't climb trees like common children." Marlo's hand stilled on the bandage. "That's a terrible thing to say to a kid." "Yes, well, my father had very specific ideas about what an Ashford should be." He watched her work, his voice soft. "You're good at this. I was studying to be a nurse before I—" She trailed off, focusing on securing the bandage. There, all done. But neither of them moved. His bandaged hand was still in hers, and she should let go, should step back, should remember that he was engaged and she was staff, and there were about 17 different reasons why this moment needed to end. "Marlo," he said, and the way he said her name like it was something precious made her heart stutter. "Don't." She pulled back, putting necessary distance between them. "Whatever you're about to say, don't." "You don't know what I was going to say." "Yes, I do." She closed the first aid kit with a snap. "You were going to say something nice, something that would make this harder than it already is. And I can't. I need this job, Mr. Ashford. I can't afford complications." "Dashiell." "What?" "My name is Dashiell, not Sir, not Mr. Ashford." He stepped closer and she forced herself not to retreat. "And for the record, you're the complication. From the moment you called me an asshole on Madison Avenue, you've been the complication." "Dashiell!" Penelope's voice rang out from the drawing room. "Darling, where did you disappear to?" The spell broke. Reality crashed back in. "You should go," Marlo whispered. He looked at her for one more long moment, something burning in his eyes that made her knees weak. Then he turned and walked back to his fiancée, his wedding, his life. And Marlo stood alone in the hallway, her hands shaking, knowing with absolute certainty that she was in serious, serious trouble. Because somewhere between the coffee incident and this moment, she'd done the stupidest thing possible. She was falling for Dashiell Ashford. God help her. Marlo couldn't sleep. It was 2 a.m. on Friday, and she'd spent the last 3 hours staring at the ceiling of her small third-floor room, replaying the hallway scene with Dashiell on an endless loop. His hand in hers. The way he'd said her name. "You're the complication." She needed air. Space. Something other than these 4 walls that were starting to feel like a prison. The mansion was silent as she crept downstairs in her pajamas, old NYU shorts and a faded t-shirt. She'd discovered the side door to the gardens on her second day, the one the staff used for quick smoke breaks. No alarms, no cameras, just blessed escape. The October night was cool against her skin as she stepped onto the perfectly manicured lawn. The garden stretched out like something from a fairy tale, marble fountains, rose arbors, and at the center, a glass conservatory that glowed softly in the moonlight. Marlo headed for the bench near the fountain, her bare feet silent on the grass. She just sat down when a voice behind her nearly gave her a heart attack. Couldn't sleep either? She spun around. Dashiell emerged from the shadows near the conservatory, wearing track pants and a Princeton sweatshirt, his dark hair disheveled. He looked younger like this, more human, less like the polished air she'd served tea to earlier. "I didn't think anyone else would be out here," she said, already standing. "I should go." "Don't." He moved closer, and moonlight caught his face. "Please, I've been trying to respect boundaries, keep my distance, but—" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Apparently I'm terrible at it." "Mr. Ashford, Dashiell," he corrected automatically. "And before you say whatever professional thing you're about to say, can we just— not? For 5 minutes? Can we be two people who can't sleep, sitting in a garden at 2 a.m.? Marlo knew she should refuse. Should run back inside, back to safety, back to the clear lines that separated their worlds. But the exhaustion in his voice, the plea in his eyes, she was only human. 5 minutes, she agreed quietly. They sat on opposite ends of the bench, a careful distance between them. For a long moment neither spoke. The fountain burbled softly. Somewhere in the distance an owl hooted. "I hate it here," Dashiell said suddenly. "I know that sounds ridiculous. Poor little rich boy in his mansion. But I hate it. Every room has a memory of my father telling me I wasn't good enough. Every hallway echoes with my mother's expectations. This place is a beautiful prison." Marlo turned to look at him. "Then why stay?" "Because it's what Ashfords do. We honor duty. We maintain appearances. We marry the right people and merge the right companies and produce the right heirs." His voice was bitter. "Penelope and I have been promised to each other since we were children. Our families, our businesses, it's all woven together. Breaking the engagement would destroy everything. Even your happiness? Ashfords don't get to be happy. We get to be successful." Marlo thought about her tiny apartment in Queens, the way Nana Birdie always had hot chocolate waiting when she came home from her late shifts, the bodega owner who let them pay for groceries on credit when money was tight, the neighbors who looked out for each other. "I'd choose Queens over this any day," she said softly. "Tell me about it." "Queens? Why?" "Because I want to know what happy sounds like." So she told him. About Nana Birdie's terrible karaoke nights in the living room. About the street fair every summer where Mr. Rodriguez made the best arepas in the world. About winter evenings watching old movies, sharing one blanket because the heat was unreliable. About the bodega cat named Chairman Meow, who thought he owned the neighborhood. And Dashiell listened like she was describing Narnia. "You're smiling," she noticed. "Am I?" He touched his face like he'd forgotten what smiling felt like. "I used to have that. Before my father died, and I took over the company. Before the weight of the Ashford legacy landed on my shoulders, I used to play guitar, write terrible songs, dream about being anyone other than who I was supposed to be. What happened? I grew up. Realized dreams are for people who can afford them." He looked at her, and the sadness in his eyes was so profound it hurt to witness. "Until you shouted at me on Madison Avenue. Until you treated me like a normal person instead of a bank account with legs. And suddenly I remembered what wanting something feels like." The air between them changed, charged with electricity neither could ignore. "Dashiell," Marlo whispered. "We can't—" "I know." But he shifted closer, closing some of the distance. "I'm engaged. You work for my family. There are 1,000 reasons why this is impossible. I know all of them. I've listed them repeatedly. It doesn't seem to matter." "Why not?" "Because when I'm with you, I feel like myself, not the Ashford heir. Not the CEO, not the disappointment my father thought I was, just me. And I haven't felt like me in years." Marlo's heart was doing dangerous things in her chest. "I feel it too," she admitted. "And it terrifies me." "Yeah?" His hand moved to rest on the bench between them, close enough that she could feel its warmth. "What are we going to do about it?" Nothing. She said the word like a prayer, a ward against temptation. You're getting married in 6 months. I need this job. We're going to be smart, professional. We're going to pretend this conversation never happened. And if I can't pretend, then you'll have to learn. She stood abruptly, putting necessary distance between them. Because I'm not the kind of girl who breaks up engagements or causes scandals. I'm not going to be your rebellion against your mother or your escape from responsibility. I'm just a girl from Queens trying to survive, and I can't afford to be collateral damage in your identity crisis. The words came out harsher than she intended, but they needed to be said. She watched them land, watched something in his expression shudder. You're right, he said quietly, standing as well. That was selfish of me. I apologize. Dashiell, no, you're absolutely right. This, whatever this is, it's not fair to you. I'll keep my distance. Professional boundaries. He took a step back, then another. Good night, Miss Cassidy. The formal address felt like a slap, but it was necessary. Safe. Good night, Mr. Ashford. She walked back to the house, feeling his eyes on her the entire way. When she reached the door, she couldn't help but glance back. He was still standing by the fountain, hands in his pockets, looking every inch the lonely prince in his castle. And Marlo climbed the stairs to her room, crawled into bed, and finally let herself cry. Not loudly, staff quarters had thin walls, but silent tears that soaked her pillow, mourning something that had never even had a chance to begin. In the West Wing, Vivian Ashford reviewed the security footage from the garden camera with cold precision. The quality was excellent. She could see every word, every gesture, every moment of connection between her son and the cleaning girl. She picked up her phone. I need more information on Marlo Cassidy, she said crisply. Every debt, every vulnerability, every pressure point. And I need it by Monday. Of course, Mrs. Ashford. And contact the Vanderberg family. Move the wedding up, 3 months instead of 6. Mrs. Ashford, the arrangements will be adjusted. We have a problem, and the solution is to accelerate the timeline. Dashiell needs to be married before this situation becomes unmanageable. She ended the call and turned back to the frozen image on screen. Her son, looking at that nobody girl like she, hung the moon. Unacceptable. The Cassidy girl would be gone by the end of the month. Vivian would make sure of it, one way or another. The envelope was waiting on Marlo's bed when she returned from her weekend at home. Plain white, expensive paper. Her name written in elegant script across the front. No return address. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Miss Cassidy, we regret to inform you that your grandmother, Bertie Cassidy, has outstanding medical debts totaling $47,000. Payment is due immediately. Failure to settle this amount within 30 days will result in legal action and potential liens against her property. Additionally, we have been informed of irregularities in your employment history that require immediate review. You are requested to meet with Mrs. Vivian Ashford Monday morning, 6 a.m. sharp, regarding your continued employment. Cornelius Pembroke. The letter slipped from Marlo's fingers. $47,000. Nana Bertie had never mentioned debts that large. And irregularities in her employment history. She'd never lied on a single application in her life. This was Vivian. It had to be. Marlo sat on the edge of her bed, her mind racing. She'd seen the way Vivian looked at her after the tea incident, had felt the woman's ice-cold assessment in every interaction, and after the garden, oh God, had there been cameras? Her phone rang. Nana Bertie. Sweetheart, some strange men came by today asking questions about me, about us. They said they were from a medical billing company, but I know, Nana, I just got a letter. $47,000, Marlo. I don't understand. My insurance covered everything after the stroke. This doesn't make sense. It made perfect sense. Someone was manufacturing problems, creating pressure points. Vivian had promised to handle obstacles, and apparently Marlo qualified. Don't worry, Marlo said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'll fix this. But how? She had maybe $3,000 in savings. The job at the mansion paid well, but not pay off fabricated debt well. And if she lost this job, which seemed inevitable now, she'd lose everything. She didn't sleep that night, just stared at the ceiling, watching the hours tick toward 6 a.m. and whatever trap Vivian had prepared. Vivian's office was in the East Wing, a room Marlowe had never been permitted to enter. It was all dark wood and leather, with oil paintings of stern-looking Ashford ancestors glaring down from the walls. Vivian sat behind a mahogany desk that could have doubled as an aircraft carrier, looking like a beautiful predator about to strike. "Sit." She gestured to a chair that was notably lower than her own. "I'll be direct, Miss Cassidy. Your employment here has become problematic. Ma'am, if this is about the tea incident, this is about appropriate behavior and boundaries." Vivian's voice was silk over steel. "You've been observed engaging in conversations with my son that exceed professional parameters. Moonlight garden rendezvous, to be specific." Marlowe's blood ran cold. "We were just talking at 2 a.m., alone, in a highly intimate setting." Vivian opened a folder. "I have photographs if you'd like to see them. Quite compelling evidence of, shall we say, inappropriate conduct." "Nothing happened. Does it matter?" Vivian leaned back, her smile sharp as a knife. "Perception is reality in our world, Miss Cassidy, and the perception of a domestic worker attempting to seduce an engaged man, the Ashford heir no less, would be devastating. To your reputation, your grandmother's standing in her community, your future employment prospects anywhere in this state." The threat hung in the air like poison. "What do you want?" Marlowe whispered. "I want you to resign, today. Pack your things, sign this non-disclosure agreement, and leave Connecticut. In exchange, I'll personally settle your grandmother's medical debts and provide a severance package of $25,000. You'll have enough to start over. Somewhere else. Somewhere far from here." Vivian pushed 2 documents across the desk. One was a resignation letter, the other, a thick NDA with a check clipped to it. $25,000. Nana Birdie's debts cleared. A fresh start. All she had to do was walk away from Dashiell. As if summoned by her thoughts, the office door burst open. "Mother, what the hell is going on?" Dashiell stood in the doorway, his face flushed with anger. "Cornelius said you called Marlowe in here. Why?" "This doesn't concern you, darling." "The hell it doesn't." He crossed to the desk, saw the papers, the check. His expression darkened. "You're bribing her to leave. I'm solving a problem before it becomes a scandal." Vivian's composure didn't crack. "Miss Cassidy has been inappropriate with you. Multiple staff members have reported." "That's a lie." "Is it?" Vivian turned to Marlowe with false concern. "Tell him, Miss Cassidy. Tell my son about your midnight conversation in the garden. How you sought him out. How you've been angling for his attention since you arrived." "That's not what happened," Marlowe said, her voice shaking with rage. "You know that's not what happened." "Do I?" Vivian's eyebrows arched. "I know what the cameras show. I know what witnesses will testify to. And I know that a girl from Queens with a sick grandmother and 3 part-time jobs would do almost anything to improve her circumstances, including seducing a wealthy man engaged to someone else." "Stop it," Dashiell said, his voice dangerous. "Mother, stop this right now. I'm protecting you, protecting this family. The Vanderbergs are already nervous about the wedding. If word gets out that you've been having late-night assignations with the cleaning girl..." "One conversation. We had one conversation. One is enough." Vivian stood, her voice rising for the first time. "You are getting married in 3 months, Dashiell. 3 months. The date has been moved up. The Vanderbergs insisted and I agreed. You will marry Penelope, merge the companies, and secure the Ashford legacy. And you will not throw it all away for some infatuation with..." "Don't." Dashiell's voice cut like a whip. "Don't finish that sentence." The room fell silent. Marlowe stood slowly, every eye turning to her. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her heart breaking in real time, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I'll resign." "Marlowe, no." Dashiell reached for her. I'll sign your papers, Mrs. Ashford. I'll take your money. I'll leave today. She met Vivian's triumphant gaze. But not because you scared me. Not because of your threats or your cameras or your manufactured debts. Then why? Vivian asked coldly. Marlowe turned to Dashiell, and the pain in her eyes nearly broke him. Because he deserves a chance to figure out what he wants without me being used as leverage. Because Nana Birdie needs her medication. Because sometimes the brave thing isn't fighting, it's knowing when to walk away. She picked up the pen. And because I'm not going to let you turn what was real into something dirty. Marlowe, please, Dashiell's voice cracked. Don't do this. 3 months, Dashiell. She signed the papers with swift strokes. You're getting married in 3 months. I was never part of that equation. But what if I don't want to marry her? What if I want, what? A cleaning girl? A scandal? A reason to blow up your life? She laughed, but it sounded like crying. I won't be that for you. I won't be the excuse you use to avoid the choice you have to make on your own. She picked up the check, folded it carefully, and looked at Vivian one last time. You win. I hope it was worth it. Then she walked out, her head high, refusing to let them see her fall apart. Dashiell stood frozen, staring at the door she'd walked through. It's for the best, darling, Vivian said softly. You'll see. In time. Get out. Dashiell, get out. He swept his arm across the desk, sending papers flying. Get out before I say something I can't take back. Vivian left, her victory tasting surprisingly bitter. And Dashiell sank into her chair, put his head in his hands, and tried to figure out how everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. In the staff quarters, Marlowe packed her few belongings with mechanical precision, tears streaming silently down her face. She'd done the right thing. So why did it feel like the worst mistake of her life? Week 1. Marlowe cashed the check, paid Nana Birdie's fabricated debts, and stared at what remained. $13,000. Blood money. The price of her dignity and Dashiell's mother's peace of mind. She threw herself into finding work, anything to avoid thinking about green eyes and midnight conversations. 3 cleaning jobs, all in Manhattan. She'd pass by the Starbucks where they'd first collided and feel her chest constrict. Nana Birdie knew something was wrong but didn't press. Just made hot chocolate and turned up the volume on their movie nights, letting Marlowe pretend her eyes weren't red from crying. Dashiell called 17 times the first week. She blocked his number. He sent flowers to her apartment. She gave them to Mrs. Rodriguez next door. He even showed up once, his Mercedes looking obscene on their street, but Nana Birdie intercepted him at the door. She doesn't want to see you, Mr. Ashford. Please. Just 5 minutes. That girl is finally sleeping through the night again. You think I'm going to let you undo that? Nana Birdie's voice was steel. You've got a wedding to plan. She's got a life to rebuild. Leave her be. He left. But Marlowe watched from her window, saw him sit in his car for 20 minutes before driving away, and had to physically restrain herself from running after him. Week 6. The wedding invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock so thick it could have been armor. Mr. and Mrs. Frederick Vanderburg and Mrs. Vivian Ashford request the honor of your presence at the marriage of Penelope Charlotte Vanderburg to Dashiell James Ashford, December 28th. The Plaza Hotel, black tie. Marlowe stared at his name until the letters blurred. Somewhere in Connecticut he was going through with it, choosing duty over happiness, becoming exactly what his family demanded. She told herself she'd done the right thing, given him space to make his own choice. Removed herself as a variable in his equation. It didn't make it hurt less. You should go, Nana Birdie said, reading over her shoulder. Are you insane? Closure, baby. You need to see it happen. See him make that choice. Otherwise you'll spend your whole life wondering what if. I'll spend my whole life trying to forget, you mean. But 3 days later, Marlowe found herself at a thrift shop in Brooklyn, trying on a black dress that almost looked like it belonged at the plaza. Week 10. Dashiell Ashford was drowning and everyone pretended not to notice. He went through the motions. Cake tastings, everything tasted like cardboard. Tuxedo fittings, the tie felt like a noose. Bachelor party, He left after 20 minutes. Penelope chattered about seating arrangements and honeymoon destinations, while he nodded at appropriate intervals, his mind always elsewhere, on curls escaping a ponytail, on terrible singing and fearless eyes, on someone who'd treated him like a person instead of a checkbook. "You're distracted," Penelope observed over dinner one night. They were at Le Bernardin, her choice, always her choice. "Is it the Asian markets?" Mother said the Shanghai office was having issues. "Something like that." "Well, stop worrying. After the wedding, we'll have the Vanderburg resources behind us. Nothing can touch us then." She reached across the table, her hand cool against his. "We're going to be so powerful together, Dashiell. Unstoppable. Powerful. Not happy. Not in love. Powerful." He thought about Marlo in her tiny apartment in Queens, with her sick grandmother and her 3 jobs and her fierce pride. More powerful in her authenticity than all the Ashfords and Vanderburgs combined. "Penelope," he started, "what if— Oh, I forgot to tell you. Mother wants to move the ceremony up by an hour. The lighting will be better for photographs. You don't mind, do you?" He minded everything. But what he said was, "Fine." That night, he drove to Queens, parked outside her building, sat there for an hour, staring at the light in what he assumed was her window, trying to find the courage to knock on her door. An elderly woman emerged from the building, spotted him, and marched to his car. "You that Ashford boy?" "Yes, ma'am. My granddaughter told me about you. You're still breaking her heart, sitting out here like some lovesick puppy." Nana Birdie's eyes were sharp. "You getting married or not?" Yes, December 28th. "Then what are you doing here?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know anything anymore except that every decision I make feels wrong." "That's because you're letting everyone else make them for you." She softened slightly. "Marlo walked away because she loves you enough to let you figure out what you want. Don't waste that gift. Don't show up at her door unless you're ready to burn your whole world down. Otherwise, you're just being cruel." She walked away, leaving Dashiell alone with the truth he'd been avoiding. He wasn't ready. Not yet. But maybe, before December 28th, he could be. Week 12. The rehearsal dinner was a nightmare of forced smiles and champagne toasts. Penelope's father gave a speech about dynasties and legacies. Vivienne looked triumphant. Penelope glowed with satisfaction, her hand possessive on Dashiell's arm, and Dashiell felt like he was watching his own funeral. "To the happy couple," someone shouted. Everyone raised their glasses. Everyone except Dashiell, who was staring at the exit, calculating how many steps it would take to reach the door. To freedom. To— His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "I know I shouldn't text. I know I said I'd stay away. But I need you to know. Whatever you choose tomorrow, I understand. I'm not angry. I'm not waiting. I just want you to be happy. Even if it's not with me. Especially if it's not with me. Be brave, Dashiell. Be yourself. You deserve that much. M." His hand shook. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The room went silent. "Dashiell?" Penelope's voice was sharp. "Are you all right?" He looked at her, really looked at her, at the life she represented. The cage wrapped in diamonds and duty. The slow death of becoming someone he wasn't. Then he looked at his mother, whose eyes had gone cold with understanding. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not all right. Darling, you're just nervous. I can't do this." "What?" Penelope laughed uncertainly. "Don't be ridiculous. The wedding is tomorrow. Everyone is here. The plaza. I can't marry you, Penelope." The words came easier now, like he was finally breathing after holding his breath for months. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. But I can't." The room erupted. Penelope's mother shrieked. Her father turned purple. Vivienne stood frozen, her carefully constructed plans crumbling before her eyes. But Dashiell was already moving, already running, already grabbing his coat and his keys and his one shot at happiness. Dashiell James Ashford, Vivienne's voice cut through the chaos. If you walk out that door, you lose everything. The company, the trust, the family name. He paused at the door, turned back. I know, Mother. But I finally figured out what's worth keeping. Then he was gone, racing through Manhattan traffic toward Queens, toward a tiny apartment with a crack in the ceiling and a girl who'd taught him what courage looked like. Behind him, his old life collapsed in a shower of broken champagne glasses and shattered expectations. Ahead of him, maybe, hopefully, if he wasn't too late, was a new one. The Plaza Hotel's ballroom sat ready for a wedding that would never happen. And Dashiell Ashford drove like his life depended on it. Because it did. Marlo was eating ice cream straight from the container when someone started pounding on her door. It was 11 p.m. on December 27th, the night before the wedding. She was in her rattiest pajamas, her hair in a messy bun, surrounded by used tissues and a half-empty bottle of wine. Nana Birdie had gone to bed an hour ago, leaving Marlo to her pity party of one. The pounding continued, urgent and desperate. Marlo, please open the door. She froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. That voice. No. It couldn't be. He was supposed to be at the rehearsal dinner, at the Plaza, with Penelope and champagne and his perfectly mapped-out future. Marlo, I know you're in there. Mrs. Rodriguez told me she saw you come home an hour ago. Traitor. Mrs. Rodriguez was officially off the Christmas cookie list. Go away, Dashiell. Not until you open this door. It's the night before your wedding. About that? His voice was breathless, wild. There's not going to be a wedding. Marlo's heart stopped. The ice cream container slipped from her hands, chocolate chip cookie dough splattering across her lap. She crossed to the door, her hands shaking, and yanked it open. Dashiell stood in her dingy hallway, still wearing his tuxedo from the rehearsal dinner, bow tie undone, jacket askew, hair a disaster from running his hands through it. His eyes were bright with something that looked dangerously like hope. You're insane, she whispered. You can't be here. I called it off. The wedding, the engagement, everything. He stepped closer, and she could see he was trembling. I stood in front of 200 people and told them I couldn't do it. My mother nearly had a stroke. Penelope threw her champagne glass at my head. Her father threatened to sue for emotional damages. It was spectacular. Dashiell, I lost the trust fund, the company shares. My mother disowned me in front of everyone. She's got her lawyers drawing up papers as we speak. The Vanderbergs are pulling all their investments. The Ashford empire is probably going to take a significant hit. He laughed, slightly hysterical. I've destroyed everything my family spent generations building. Marlo's mind was reeling. Why would you do that? Because of your text. He pulled out his phone, showed her the message she'd sent in a moment of weakness. You said be brave. You said be yourself. And I realized I've never been myself. Not once in 31 years. I've been the Ashford heir, the dutiful son, the perfect merger candidate, but never just Dashiell. So you burned down your entire life? Yes. His voice echoed in the hallway. Someone's door cracked open. Mrs. Chen from 3B, definitely watching the show. Yes, I burned it down. Because it wasn't my life. It was theirs. And I'm done living for everyone else. That's Marlo struggled for words. Marlo. That's the most idiotic, reckless, romantic thing I've ever heard. Is it working? No. You just destroyed your future? What are you going to do now? Where are you going to live? How are you going to... I don't know. He laughed again, running his hands through his hair. I have no idea. I've got my savings account and a really angry mother and absolutely no plan. For the first time in my life, I don't know what happens next. And it's terrifying and amazing and... He stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. And I need you to tell me I didn't just make the biggest mistake of my life. I can't tell you that. His face fell. Oh. Because I have no idea if it was a mistake or not. I don't know if you'll regret this tomorrow or next month or next year. I don't know if you'll resent me for being the reason you lost everything. You're not the reason. You're the revelation. There's a difference. Dashiell, her voice cracked. I'm terrified. This is crazy. You're the heir to a fortune and I'm a girl from Queens who cleans houses for a living. Your mother hates me. Your entire world just imploded. And you're standing in my hallway at 11 p.m. like this is some kind of romantic comedy. Isn't it, though? He smiled, and it was the most genuine smile she'd ever seen on his face. The uptight rich guy and the girl who called him an asshole on Madison Avenue? That's definitely a romantic comedy. Despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the absolute insanity of the situation, Marlo laughed. You're completely insane. Probably, but I'm also completely impossibly terrifyingly in love with you. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. I've been in love with you since you yelled at me about coffee, since you sang off-key in my library, since you bandaged my hand and told me I deserved better than my father's cruelty. You made me want to be brave. So here I am. Being brave. Marlo's eyes filled with tears. This is a terrible idea. The worst. We barely know each other. Then we'll learn. You just gave up everything for me. What if I'm not worth it? Marlo. He took her hands, his grip warm and solid and real. You're worth everything. You're the first real thing I've had in my entire life. And I know this is fast and crazy and probably premature, but I'm done pretending. I'm done playing it safe. I'm done living half a life because I'm too scared to reach for what I actually want. And what do you want? You, Queens. Hot chocolate with your grandmother, bodega cats, street fairs and terrible karaoke, and a life that's actually mine. His voice softened. I want to figure out who Dashiell is when he's not being in Ashford, and I want to do it with you if you'll let me. A door opened behind Marlo. Nana Birdie stood there in her bathrobe, arms crossed, looking between them with shrewd eyes. He shone up at midnight in a tuxedo, declared his love, and gave up his fortune. That's pretty good as grand gestures go. Nana? Question is, baby girl, what are you going to do about it? Marlo looked at Dashiell, really looked at him, saw the fear beneath the bravado, the vulnerability in his eyes. The way he was trying so hard to be brave even though his whole world had just collapsed. He'd chosen her. Not the easy path, not the safe path. Her. I'm going to do something incredibly stupid, Marlo said slowly. Yeah? Hope flickered across Dashiell's face. She pulled him inside into her tiny apartment with its cracked ceiling and secondhand furniture, and absolutely zero resemblance to the Ashford mansion. Into her real life, with all its beautiful messiness. Yeah. She stood on her toes and kissed him. Finally. And it was nothing like the movies. It was better. Awkward and perfect and tasting like cookie dough ice cream and wine and new beginnings. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Nana Birdie was grinning. Well, all right then. I'll make hot chocolate. You two figure out how to survive on love and stupidity. We'll need more than hot chocolate, Marlo said, still holding on to Dashiell like he might disappear. He's going to need a job, a place to stay. He can take the couch until you two figure things out. Nana Birdie headed to the kitchen. And Mr. Rodriguez's brother owns a construction company. They're always hiring. Dashiell blinked. Construction? You think you're too good for honest work, Ashford? Marlo raised an eyebrow. No, construction. Okay. I can do construction. He looked around the small apartment at the life he'd just signed up for and smiled. This is really happening. This is really happening, Marlo confirmed. You just gave up mansions for a couch in Queens. Best trade I ever made. Outside, snow began to fall on December 27th in New York City. At the plaza, the ballroom sat empty, waiting for a wedding that would never come. And in a tiny apartment in Queens, two people who'd collided over coffee and connected over midnight conversations held each other close and laughed at the beautiful disaster they'd just created. It wasn't the ending either of them had planned. It was so much better. Month 1, January. Dashiell Ashford had never been poor before. He discovered this on his third day sleeping on Marlowe's couch when he went to buy coffee and his credit card was declined. All of them. His mother had worked fast. Accounts frozen, cards canceled, trust fund locked down tighter than Fort Knox. "That'll be $475, the barista said impatiently. Dashiell stood there, wallet open, realizing he had exactly $7 in cash to his name. $7. He'd spent more than that on shoelaces. "I got it." Marlowe appeared at his elbow, sliding a $5 across the counter. "Keep the change." Outside, Dashiell tried to explain. "I'll pay you back. As soon as It's $5, Dashiell. Relax." But he could see the worry in her eyes. The calculation. She'd taken on another mouth to feed, and her budget was already stretched thin. That afternoon he started at Rodriguez Construction. His first task, hauling 50-pound bags of concrete mix up 3 flights of stairs in a building with no elevator. By hour 2, his hands were blistered. By hour 4, every muscle screamed. By the end of day 1, he collapsed on Marlowe's couch, too exhausted to even shower. "How is work?" she asked, trying not to smile at his groaning. "I think I'm dying." "Welcome to the real world, rich boy." She tossed him some Advil. "It gets easier." Probably. It didn't get easier. But slowly, painfully, Dashiell learned how to frame a wall, how to read a blueprint, how to earn respect from men who didn't care about his last name or his Princeton degree, just whether he could do the job. "You're not completely useless," Rodriguez said after 2 weeks. "Still soft as butter, but you show up on time. That counts for something." It was the best compliment Dashiell had received in years. Month 2, February. The media storm was relentless. "Ashford heir abandons empire for mystery woman," screamed the New York Post, featuring a grainy photo of Marlowe leaving her building. "Poor little rich boy, Dashiell Ashford's fall from grace," declared Forbes, with analysis of the stock hit to Ashford Industries. "Who is the Queen's cleaning girl who destroyed a dynasty?" asked page 6, complete with photos of their apartment building and speculation about Marlowe's ulterior motives. The attention was suffocating. Reporters camped outside their building. Cameras followed Marlowe to work. Someone offered her $100,000 for an exclusive interview. "It's not worth it," she told Dashiell after a particularly brutal day of being chased by paparazzi. "I can't do this. This isn't what I signed up for." "I know, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm not saying I want out." She took his face in her hands. "I'm saying we need a better plan than hiding and hoping they get bored." The next day, Dashiell did something he'd never done before. He called a press conference. "My name is Dashiell Ashford," he began, facing dozens of cameras in a community center Rodriguez had helped him secure. "And I'd like to set the record straight. Marlowe Cassidy didn't destroy anything. She didn't seduce me or manipulate me or scheme her way into my life. She simply existed, authentically, bravely, honestly. And that made me realize I'd been living a lie." He told them everything. The arranged marriage. The pressure. The moment in the garden when he'd first felt like himself. The choice he'd made to walk away. "I don't expect sympathy. I had every advantage, every opportunity, and I chose to leave it behind. That's on me. But Marlowe? She's not a homewrecker or a gold digger or whatever narrative you're trying to sell. She's a woman who works 3 jobs to take care of her grandmother, who tried to walk away from me multiple times because she didn't want to cause problems, who has more integrity in her little finger than I had in my entire previous life." He looked directly into the cameras. "So here's my statement. Leave her alone. You want to write about me? Fine. Analyze my choices. Question my sanity. But Marlowe Cassidy is off limits. She didn't ask for any of this." The press conference went viral. "Leave Marlowe alone" started trending. The tide began to turn. "That was really stupid and really brave," Marlowe said that night, curled up next to him on the couch. "I learned from the best." Month 3. March. Vivian Ashford showed up on a Tuesday. Marlowe answered the door to find Dashiell's mother standing in their hallway, looking as out of place as a diamond in a dollar store. Perfectly coiffed, designer suit, expression carved from ice. Mrs. Ashford. Miss Cassidy, I'd like to speak with my son. He's at work, construction site in Brooklyn. Marlowe didn't move from the doorway. Won't be back until 6. I'll wait. Suit yourself. They sat in uncomfortable silence, Vivian perched on the edge of the couch like it might contaminate her, while Marlowe made tea. The apartment had never felt smaller. You must be very proud of yourself, Vivian finally said. Actually, I'm exhausted. Proud doesn't really factor into it. You took my son, destroyed everything I built. No. Marlowe set down the teacup firmly. You destroyed it, with your manipulation and your threats and your inability to let your son be human. I didn't take Dashiell from you. You pushed him away. Vivian's composure cracked just slightly. I gave him everything, except permission to be himself. And look what that's gotten him. Vivian gestured at the tiny apartment. He's living in squalor, working manual labor. He threw away billions. And he's happy. Marlowe's voice was quiet, but firm. For the first time in his life, he's actually happy. I see him come home exhausted from real work, and he's smiling. He talks about learning to build things with his hands. He's making friends who don't care about his trust fund. He's becoming who he was meant to be. He's becoming common. He's becoming free. The door opened. Dashiell walked in, covered in drywall dust, and froze when he saw his mother. Hello, Dashiell. Vivian stood, smoothing her skirt. You look different. I am different. He moved to stand beside Marlowe, his hand finding hers automatically. What are you doing here, Mother? I came to make you an offer. Come back. Marry Penelope. She's willing to forgive this episode. The Vanderbergs are open to renegotiation. We can spin this as a quarter-life crisis. You'll have access to your accounts again, your position in the company. No. Think about what you're giving up. I'm not giving up anything. I already gave it up. 3 months ago. He squeezed Marlowe's hand. And I've never been more certain of a decision in my life. Vivian looked between them, and for just a moment, something like grief flickered across her face. I don't understand. How can you choose this over everything I built for you? Because you built it for me, not with me. You never asked what I wanted. You just decided. His voice softened. I know you think you were protecting me, securing my future. But you were suffocating me. And I finally found someone who lets me breathe. Vivian's mask slipped further. She looked older, suddenly tired. You're really not coming back. No, Mother, I'm not. She nodded slowly, gathering her composure like armor. At the door, she paused. The company is struggling without you. The board is concerned. If you ever change your mind, I won't. She looked at Marlowe one last time. Take care of him. He's more fragile than he pretends. Then she was gone, her heels clicking down the stairs, carrying the last remnants of Dashiell's old life with her. Marlowe turned to him. You okay? Yeah. He pulled her close, resting his chin on her head. Yeah, I really am. She might be right, you know, about the fragile thing. Probably. But I've got you to catch me if I fall. Always, she promised. Outside, spring was coming to Queens. The bodega put out flowers. Chairman Meow claimed his usual sunny spot on the sidewalk. And in their tiny apartment, 2 people who'd collided over coffee and connected over courage held each other and proved that sometimes losing everything is how you find what actually matters. They still had challenges ahead. Bills to pay. Futures to figure out. A world that didn't quite know what to make of them. But they had each other. And that was enough. October, 1 year. After the coffee incident. The community center in Queens was packed to capacity. Marlowe stood backstage, adjusting her dress. Not from a thrift store this time, but still nothing fancy. Simple blue cotton that Nana Birdie said made her eyes sparkle. She could hear the crowd gathering, the excited chatter, the sound of chairs scraping against linoleum. "You ready?" Dashiell appeared beside her, looking impossibly handsome in a simple black suit. His hands were calloused now, his shoulders broader from months of construction work. But it was his eyes that had changed the most. They were lighter, freer, actually happy. "Nervous," she admitted. "Don't be. They're going to love it." It was the Cassidy Ashford Community Initiative, a non-profit they'd spent the last 6 months building from the ground up. After Dashiell had gotten his contractor's license, they'd had an idea. What if they renovated abandoned buildings in Queens and turned them into affordable housing? What if they trained local residents in construction trades? What if they proved that you didn't need billions to make a difference, just commitment and community? Today was the grand opening of their first project, a formerly condemned building now transformed into 6 beautiful apartments for low-income families, with a ground-floor training center. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nana Birdie's voice boomed through the microphone. She'd insisted on being MC. "Please welcome the founders of this miracle, my granddaughter Marlo Cassidy and her better half Dashiell Ashford." The crowd erupted. Marlo recognized faces from the neighborhood: Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Chen, the bodega owner, even Chairman Meow had been smuggled in somehow. But there were also reporters, city council members, and in the back trying to be inconspicuous. "Is that your mother?" Marlo whispered. Dashiell followed her gaze. Vivian Ashford stood in the very last row, dressed down by her standards in a simple pantsuit, her face carefully neutral. "Yeah," he breathed. "It is." They hadn't spoken in 6 months. Not since that day in the apartment. Dashiell had sent her an invitation to today's event, but hadn't expected her to actually come. The presentation went perfectly. Dashiell explained the construction process, the sustainable materials, the partnership with local trade schools. Marlo talked about the families who'd be moving in, single mothers, elderly residents, young couples just starting out. People like her and Nana Birdie had been before this opportunity. "We wanted to prove something," Marlo concluded, her voice steady. "That you don't need to come from money to create change. That the most valuable currency is community. That sometimes the best thing you can build isn't an empire, it's a home." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, as they mingled with the crowd, Cornelius appeared, of all people, carrying an envelope. "Mr. Ashford, Miss Cassidy." He gave a slight bow, that familiar, impassive expression in place. "Mrs. Ashford asked me to deliver this personally." Inside was a check and a handwritten note on Vivian's monogrammed stationery. "Dashiell, I've spent the last year being angry. Angry at you for leaving. Angry at Miss Cassidy for existing. Angry at myself for not seeing what I was doing to you until it was too late. What you've built here, this community initiative, this life, it's extraordinary. More meaningful than any merger or acquisition I ever orchestrated. Your father would have called it a waste of your potential. But watching you today, I realized you finally found your potential. You just had to leave everything behind to discover it. The enclosed check is not a bribe or an attempt to control you. It's an investment in your vision. Do with it what you will. Build more homes. Train more workers. Change more lives. I may never understand your choice, but I'm beginning to respect it. And Miss Cassidy, Marlo, I was wrong about you, profoundly wrong. You didn't take my son from me. You gave him back to himself. That's a gift I can never repay. Perhaps someday you'll allow me to be part of this world you're building, not as Mrs. Ashford, just as Dashiell's mother. If that's possible. With respect I should have shown sooner." Vivian Dashiell stared at the check. It was for $2 million. "Holy." Marlo couldn't finish the sentence. "Mr. Ashford?" Cornelius's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Your mother wanted me to tell you that she's proud of you. She couldn't say it herself. Too many people watching. But she wanted you to know." Dashiell looked toward the back of the room, but Vivian was already gone, slipping out quietly the way she'd come in, giving them their moment without overshadowing it. "I think," Dashiell said slowly, "that might have been an apology. That was definitely an apology. Marlo wrapped her arms around his waist. A very Vivian Ashford apology, but still. Think she means it about being part of this? Only one way to find out. But that's a problem for another day. She pulled back to look at him. Right now, we have 6 families waiting to get their keys, a celebration to attend, and oh my God, is that Penelope? Sure enough, Penelope Vanderberg stood near the refreshment table, looking deeply uncomfortable but present. When she saw them looking, she raised her champagne glass in a small salute. I sent her an invitation too, Dashiell admitted. Didn't think she'd actually come. They made their way over. Penelope smiled tightly. Nice place. Very authentic. She meant it as a compliment, Marlo realized, in her own way. I'm engaged, to a venture capitalist. Very boring, very appropriate, exactly what our families wanted. But watching you today... She paused, something genuine breaking through her usual polish. I'm glad you got out, Dashiell. Glad you found something real. Thank you, Penelope. That means a lot. And Marlo, I was terrible to you, insufferable, I'm sorry. Water under the bridge, Marlo said, and meant it. After Penelope left, after the families received their keys with tears and gratitude, after the last reporter packed up and the last well-wisher headed home, Marlo and Dashiell stood alone in the renovated building lobby, looking at what they'd created together. Remember when you called me an asshole? Dashiell asked. Best day of my life. Mine too. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Which is why I wanted to ask you something here, in this place we built together instead of somewhere fancy. Marlo's heart stopped. Dashiell, I know we've only been together a year. I know we're still figuring things out, still building our future one day at a time. But I also know that I want every future day to be with you. I want to renovate more buildings and train more workers and argue about paint colors and eat ice cream at midnight and grow old in Queens with you and Nana Birdie and Chairman Meow. He opened the box. The ring inside was simple, a small diamond, nothing like the massive rock Penelope had worn. But it was real, earned with his construction wages, chosen with love. Marlo Cassidy, will you marry me? She was crying and laughing and nodding all at once. Yes. Yes, you ridiculous, wonderful, formerly rich idiot. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and they kissed there in the lobby of their first completed project, surrounded by the smell of fresh paint and new beginnings, and everything they'd built from nothing but courage and love. So, Marlo said when they finally broke apart, does this mean I have to start calling you Mr. Ashford again? Try it and I'll divorce you before we even get married. Outside, Queens sparkled in the autumn twilight. Somewhere in Connecticut, Vivian Ashford smiled at her phone, looking at photos Cornelius had discreetly taken. Somewhere in Manhattan, Penelope showed her new fiancé the invitation to the community center opening and explained why it mattered. And somewhere in a bodega down the street, Chairman Meow knocked over a display of chips in celebration. The coffee-spilling, mansion-dwelling, worlds-colliding romance that started with shouting on Madison Avenue had become something neither of them expected. A real life. A real love. A real future. And it was perfect. The wedding that actually happened. They got married on a rooftop in Queens on a perfect June morning, with the Manhattan skyline glittering in the distance like a reminder of the world they'd left behind. Marlo wore a dress from a local designer, one of the women who'd gone through their training program and started her own business. Simple ivory lace, nothing like the couture gown that had been selected for Dashiell's first almost wedding. This one was hers, real, perfect. Nana Birdie walked her down the aisle crying happy tears and squeezing Marlo's hand so tight it almost hurt. Your mama would be so proud, she whispered. So damn proud. Dashiell stood at the altar in a suit he'd bought off the rack, his construction crew standing as his groomsmen, Rodriguez as best man, naturally. When he saw Marlo, his eyes filled with tears he didn't bother hiding. Hi, she mouthed when she reached him. Hi, he mouthed back, grinning like an idiot. The ceremony was officiated by Mrs. Chen, who'd gotten ordained online specifically for this occasion. Chairman Meow served as ring bearer. Sort of. He mostly just sat on the ring pillow and refused to move until Rodriguez bribed him with treats. Vivian sat in the front row, next to Cornelius, who'd retired from the Ashford mansion and now volunteered at the community initiative 3 days a week. She dabbed her eyes discreetly when they exchanged vows, and afterward, she hugged Marlowe for the first time ever. "Welcome to the family," Vivian said quietly. "Officially this time. Thank you for coming, for everything. Thank you for saving my son." Vivian pulled back, her eyes serious. "I mean that. You gave him a life worth living." The reception was held in the courtyard of their third completed building project. The Cassidy Ashford initiative had grown beyond anyone's wildest expectations. 32 renovated buildings across Queens and the Bronx. Over 300 families housed. 200 workers trained. A waiting list that stretched for blocks. Dashiell's speech as the groom was predictably emotional. "5 years ago I spilled coffee on the most beautiful, fierce, terrifying woman I'd ever met. She called me an asshole. Correctly, I might add. And I drove away thinking I'd never see her again. Thank God for second chances. Thank God for midnight conversations and garden confessions and the courage it takes to burn down your whole life when it's not the right one. Marlowe, you didn't just change my life. You gave me one. I love you more than words, more than mansions, more than anything I ever thought mattered. Here's to forever in Queens." Marlowe's speech made everyone ugly cry. "I used to think fairy tales were for other people, rich people, people whose lives didn't involve 3 jobs and overdue rent and cleaning other people's toilets. But then this arrogant, beautiful disaster of a man crashed into me, literally, and taught me that fairy tales aren't about glass slippers and castles. They're about finding someone who makes you braver than you knew you could be. Someone who chooses you every single day, even when it costs everything. Dashiell, you could have had easy. You chose real. You chose us. And I promise to choose you right back, every day for the rest of our lives." They danced to Fleetwood Mac's Dreams, obviously, and Dashiell still couldn't keep rhythm, and Marlowe still sang slightly off-key, and it was absolutely perfect. The life they built, 5 years in, their apartment had changed. They'd moved from the tiny studio to a modest 2-bedroom in the same building, one they'd renovated themselves. Nothing fancy, but it had a kitchen big enough for Nana Birdie's Sunday dinners and a spare room that doubled as an office for the initiative. Dashiell had his contractor's license, his own small construction company that specialized in affordable housing. He woke up at 5 a.m. most mornings, grabbed coffee from the bodega, where he was now on a first-name basis with everyone, and headed to whatever site needed him most. His hands were permanently calloused, his shoulders sun-browned, his Princeton degree gathering dust somewhere while he built futures for families who needed them. He'd never been happier. Marlowe had finished her nursing degree, night classes paid for partly by scholarship, partly by their salaries, partly by a mysterious anonymous donation that they both suspected came from Vivian. She worked 3 days a week at the community health clinic they'd opened in one of their buildings, providing free health care to residents who couldn't afford it elsewhere. The other 2 days she ran the administrative side of the initiative, working alongside Dashiell to expand their reach, secure funding, and prove that sometimes the best business model is just giving a damn about people. The family that grew, Nana Birdie had her own apartment in one of their buildings, first floor, wheelchair accessible with a garden view. She hosted Sunday dinners that had become legendary in the neighborhood. Dashiell always showed up early to help cook, and she'd finally stopped calling him Mr. Ashford and started calling him my boy. Vivian visited once a month, always bringing expensive wine and slowly learning how to be a mother instead of a CEO. She'd stepped back from Ashford Industries. The board had pushed her out after the scandal, ironically, and now sat on the board of the Cassidy Ashford Initiative instead. She was still imperious, still sharp-tongued, but there was warmth there now. Growth. "Your father would be appalled," she told Dashiell one Sunday over Nana Birdie's famous lasagna, and I mean that as the highest compliment. Cornelius had become surrogate grandfather to everyone, teaching neighborhood kids chess in the community center, and telling stories about the old days that made even Vivian blush. Penelope sent a Christmas card every year from London, where she'd moved with her venture capitalist husband. The last one included a photo of their newborn daughter and a note. "Thank you for showing me there's more than one way to be happy. Visiting New York next spring, dinner in Queens." Even the media had come around. The initial scandalous headlines had evolved into human interest stories. The Ashford who chose people over profit. From mansions to meaningful, a modern fairy tale. How one couple is revolutionizing affordable housing. The future they're building. On a random Tuesday evening, Marlo found Dashiell on their fire escape, looking out at the Queen's skyline with that expression she'd come to recognize. The one that meant he was thinking too hard about something. "You okay?" She climbed out to join him, bringing 2 beers. "More than okay." He pulled her close, and they sat there in comfortable silence for a moment. "I was just thinking about that day. The coffee incident. Madison Avenue. How angry you were. I was justified. You were being an asshole." "Completely justified," he agreed, laughing. "But if you hadn't yelled at me that day, if I hadn't remembered you, if I hadn't walked into that library and seen you on that ladder, we might have missed each other entirely." Terrifying thought. Marlo leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know what's funny? I used to dream about living in a mansion, having money, not worrying about bills. And now you have exactly what you always wanted?" "No. Now I have something better. I have enough. We have enough. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to be happy and help others and build something that matters." She looked up at him. "Is that crazy?" "If it is, we're crazy together." He kissed her forehead. "Rodriguez wants to expand into Staten Island. Thinks we could do 15 buildings in the next 3 years. That's ambitious." "So are we." He grinned. "Also, I was thinking, what if we started thinking about a bigger apartment, maybe 3 bedrooms instead of 2? Marlo's heart skipped. "Dashiell Ashford, are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that maybe, possibly, when you're ready, and only when you're ready, we could think about adding to our family. If you want. No pressure." She turned to face him fully, seeing the hope and nervousness in his eyes. This man who'd given up billions for her, who built homes with his bare hands, who'd chosen hard and real over easy and fake every single day for 5 years. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes? Yes. Let's have a baby. Let's make our family even bigger. Let's add one more person to this crazy, beautiful life we've built." His smile could have lit up all of Queens. "Yeah? Yeah." She kissed him, soft and sure. "But I'm not leaving Queens. Wouldn't dream of it. Our kids are going to grow up here, learning from Nana Birdie, getting spoiled by Cornelius, probably adopting 17 bodega cats. Oh God, we're going to be those parents. The best kind." They sat there as the sun set over their neighborhood, over the buildings they'd renovated, over the community they'd helped build. Somewhere below, someone was playing music too loud. Mrs. Rodriguez was yelling at her kids in Spanish. A car alarm went off and nobody seemed concerned. Chairman Meow was probably plotting his next chip display attack. It was noisy and chaotic and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. 5 years ago, Dashiell Ashford had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. Now he had calloused hands, a tiny apartment, a job that paid a fraction of what he'd been worth on paper, and absolutely everything that mattered. Marlo had stopped cleaning other people's houses and started building homes, real homes, full of love and purpose and community. They'd traded mansions for meaning, diamonds for dust, and discovered that sometimes the richest life is the one you build with your own hands, alongside the person who makes you brave enough to try. "Hey," Marlo said softly. "Hey. I love you. Just in case I forget to say it today. You've said it 3 times already, but I never get tired of hearing it." He pulled her closer. "I love you too. Every day, every version of you. From the angry coffee girl to the fierce advocate to the future mother of my children to whatever comes next." "Whatever comes next," she echoed. And that was the real fairy tale. Not the ending. The beginning. Again and again, and again. The end,